Allegra Brucker. You're in Ashland, Oregon right now?
I am, yes.
Is that where you postcarded this past year?
Yes.
How long have you been in Ashland?
About 5 years, but I go back and forth between here and the Salmon River in California. So during COVID, I postcarded from the Salmon River because that's where I was.
I think we just made that a verb today, postcarded. There's an interest. Well, first of all, you say Ashland, Oregon, I think Shakespeare. So did Shakespeare draw you to Ashland?
No, but I do love the Shakespeare Festival here.
Yeah. And the Lithium Springs, which
Yes.
is cool. Yeah. Very
Yes.
nice park, nice town. Um, you heard about postcards from Diane di Prima.
Yeah, I'd love to tell you the story a little bit.
I want to hear
Um,
the whole thing.
yeah, I'll have to tell you the whole Diane story to get there. Um, so I grew up on a commune in Northern California called Black Bear Ranch. And my mom arrived there in the spring of 1970. And she heard stories about Diane di Prima, who had just left like 2 months before. And Diane had been living in the barn loft with her 5 children. Um, and so I kind of grew up in this legacy of Diane, like knowing about Diane, but my mom hadn't actually met her. And, but my mother's also a writer and came from the East Coast as well. Um, and so Diane was very close friends with Elsa Marley, who was one of the founders of Black Bear Ranch. And Elsa and my mom became very close. But so I grew up with this library at Black Bear, which had not only various books of Diane's, but it had collections of things that she left behind, like the Floating Bear anthology, which is what she had um, she had was the editor for in New York before she came to Black Bear, and I brought those to Diane at some point. Now I kind of wish I had them still, but so yeah, so go forward about 20, maybe 24 years, and my mom, Elsa, invited my mom to do a writing workshop with Diane, which was called Hanging Out and Writing with Diane di Prima. And that was this annual fall retreat that she did. So my mom did it. And I think maybe the next year, maybe it was the year after, she said, you really should come and do this. So I went, I was in my early 20s, and I went and I met Diane and I started Write Connection. And I ended up studying with her for the next 6 years, doing some workshops. And then I took her very last Foundations of Poetics class, which was a one Sunday a month class in San Francisco. That must have been in 2010. And then that's when I got pregnant with my first child, which took me on a sort of detour from from poetry for a while. But yeah, and so Diane introduced me to postcard poetry after that first workshop that I'd done with her. She led a group, and the instructions said, courtesy of Paul Nelson at the bottom. And I ended up leading postcard groups for the next, well, it's been almost probably 13 or 14 years that I've been leading these groups. And just 3 years ago, I actually found you, Paul. And I had looked at some point when the internet wasn't quite as resourceful as it is now. And that must have been, 10 or 12 years ago. I had kind of looked for you and I didn't find you. So it turns out you've been doing these postcard festivals all along. The groups that I run are a little bit different. They're usually bit smaller, like 10 to 20 participants, and we usually go through a few cycles together. And instead of just having a set amount of postcards that you send out, you start by sending out 3, and then when you receive a card, you send another card, which is what your original instructions said to do. And if you don't receive any cards, then just start sending some until you receive some. It's there, you get to know the writers a little bit better. You kind of develop a relationship. But during the postcard festival, over the years, you develop relationships with people as well. So it's been interesting. So how I actually got to your postcard group was that in 2020, when I was on the Salmon River, I decided, I should start right at the beginning of COVID. I said, we should do a postcard group. This isolation, like this is just this is too much, and I hadn't done one for a few years. And so I posted something on the Palm Beach Poetry Festival past participants page, because I had done the Palm Beach Poetry Festival in 2017, and this poet Richard Osler commented and said he would like to join. And then he said, oh, I sent the instructions, and he said something about you. And so that was right about the time that I said, I better figure out what's going on with this poetry festival. So I joined your festival as well that year. But and Richard was also in your festival that year. So there was I wrote a lot of postcards in 2020.
They're addictive.
They are. So I'm an artist of many mediums, and the postcard is just, especially since having kids, it's just a perfect size art form for me. So honestly, for me, creating the poems and creating the postcard, I'm not sure which comes first, which is more important. It's a whole process, really. But it's definitely addictive, and it's one of my favorite things to do. So I just love postcards, poetry, and bringing them together. And one form that I really love to write on the postcards is centos, and I like to take lines from other people's poems and weave them together. Those tend to be some of my favorite poems that happen.
Would you care to share one of your postcard poems with us?
I would love to. Well, I'm going to share one first. Let's see, I have a variety here. Nope, that's not them. Here we go. The first one I'd like to share, you'll know why I'm sharing it. So this is my poem about writing postcards, really. Every poem on a postcard is a kind of peace offering to myself. I press my heart into the paper and breathe. There's joy for the sender and the receiver. There is no monetary gain or exchange. How do we make everyday life more like postcard poetry projects?
Amen to that, sister. I mean, really, that encompasses so much. I mean, I facilitate workshops called Poetics as Cosmology, and that's basically what it is, what you stated in that poem. How do we make our life more like we make the poem, or how do we make the poem more like we make our life if our life is successful and a creative endeavor? So, right, perfect. There's so many things that I would want to talk to you about. You mentioned developing relationships with postcard people over the years. Tell us maybe a couple of the names that come to your mind when you think about that.
Well, Colette Dunton and I have become friends, and I think she must have been on that first list I was in, and then we've exchanged postcards and various communications throughout the years. Tim Mateer also, he joined that early group I had done. So I'm trying to figure out what happened is I got onto your Facebook page before I'd actually done a year, because that was in April of 2020. And so I think I posted something there. And so a few people, I think Colette joined that, and also Tim, and a few other people joined me there. And I would say, who else? Let's see. I gotta look now. Is it Sarah Martinez? Is that her name? I'm forgetting.
Jessica, maybe.
Jessica Martinez. Yep. Jessica Martinez. And there's another Sarah with Sarah
Koenig.
Yeah.
Koenig. Yeah.
Yep. So yeah, those are some people that I've connected with. What's the other one? Is Kristen or Ryberg. Is
Kristen
that right?
Ryberg
Yeah.
in Virginia.
Yeah. So
Virginia? No,
it's been
North Carolina.
North Carolina. Yeah. And, we spent the last year actually. We took our kids out of school and homeschooled for a year and spent the year traveling around the country in an RV. And I wish I'd actually made a point to visit some of these postcard people. For some reason, I didn't really think about that until I got home. But that would be a fun
You
thing.
had their addresses the
I
whole
have
time.
their addresses. Yeah, yeah, yeah. So,
Tell us about how how you approach the postcard fest, how you sit down and write about a typical poem. Give us walk us through the stage by stage effort to create a postcard poem.
um, well, I'm a messy artist, so there isn't necessarily one particular method, but often what happens is that my kids and I will start making art together. And I'll usually make a batch of cards. I do a lot of collage and painting and various different things. And I'll usually make a batch of cards. Lately, I've been enjoying a lot of cut up poems too. So I just I just gather words and put them on my paper, and then usually the poems come, or they just kind of. It's always been poetry for me. I mean, there's a practice for sure, but they just come to me, and then I put them on the cards. Sometimes I write them in a little book first. I know you like to go first draft right onto the card, but oftentimes I have this little book that I carry around for me. So they usually go into the book once and then onto the card. But I don't do a whole lot of editing. Then sometimes I'll go back, revisit the poem afterwards. So yeah, I really have been enjoying collage and using words in my collage this year. So that a lot of poems came through phrases that I'd found, or so when I do the centos, one thing I like to do is actually put the cards in order by date that I've received them or that their postmark is. And then I take the first line from the first card and the second line from the second card and the third line from the third card and so on until I have a poem. That one's fun. And what else? Yeah, I don't know. I guess my art is pretty spontaneous.
Yeah, I mean that's the spirit behind the fest. It's the spirit behind bebop. It's the spirit behind abstract expressionism, behind Zen, behind so many things that I think are part of the foundation of the philosophy of the Postcard Fest when it's done like that. You have another poem to read?
Yeah, I'd love to read you a cento, which is one that came out of this one. I was from 2020. It was a postcard poem from 2020. And I wish I had the image. I can just share it with you, but it's not the actual card. But there is an iceberg in my suitcase or in my heart. I'm not sure which. Is sorrow our forever home, or can we rise up like smoke or sunflowers? Push the seeds into the earth and find out. This is our window.
Amen. Amen to that.
And that one was a cento.
Yeah, it's on the edge of sounding like it's composed or collage. So very effective. Nicely done. I was looking at your Facebook profile and I was looking for a way to describe you, and I didn't really see anything. So I went to Instagram just to see if there's anything there. And I look at your Instagram profile and it says hashtag neurodivergent. And, I have a little girl who has struggled with dyslexia and now dyscalculia. She's in the back seat of the car asking me to give her formulas because she's got a pocket calculator. And then, of course, we tune in Kraftwerk on the radio and pocket calculator to have the soundtrack for it. But you're out as a neurodivergent person. What does that mean, and how does that affect your relationship with art and with postcards in particular?
Yeah, so you found I have a couple Instagram sites, but my one is called Pieces of a Mother. And I created that really around the time when I was kind of coming out as neurodivergent. And it was interesting. I was just looking back through it yesterday to sort of see. In the beginning, my focus really was about neurodivergence. And I guess it's like that a lot when you discover something where you have a big momentum around it. Um, so my son was diagnosed with autism. Well, first he was diagnosed with ADHD when he was 5 or 6. And he's always just been a different a different being. When he was a little baby, people would come up to me on the street and just look at him and say, "Wow, he's an old soul."
Mm.
And with my second son, no one ever did that. And it was just there was something different about my first child. And he was a very challenging baby. Um, so curious and just I mean, he's an amazing he's amazing. So he's been one of my greatest teachers.
Mhm.
So first we found this thing about ADHD, and I was like, wow. A lot of the when I started learning about ADHD in women, I realized that that was definitely something going on for myself. Um, but then eventually he did get an autism diagnosis as well. And that really sort of opened up a whole world to me, just learning about all these different ways our brains work and these different kind of styles of people. And so that's what neurodivergent is describing, people with not normal uh, neurology, which I don't know really what normal neurology is anymore. But there's a thing about women, especially going undiagnosed, because women and girls don't have the typical symptoms that have been known about autism and ADHD both, which is, hyperactivity, very, it can be a lot of trouble with transitions, a lot of trouble with social interaction, different things like that. But the thing about women, which we learn to do, is we learn this thing called masking. And so we figure out how to act like we know, we're like everyone else. And so that can be really, it can be really hard. It's really exhausting for one thing. I feel super fortunate that I grew up with definitely a neurodivergent family, whether or not they knew, what that meant, but in a very alternative lifestyle where my art and my creativity and my sort of not following the mainstream was embraced and really celebrated. And so I think that's part of why I didn't know also that maybe I had ADHD or these different things earlier, was because it was just very accepted that it was fine to be different. And I've always been. My mother is an artist as well, and a poet, and I grew up with a really strong connection. And my dad is a musician, a guitar player, and an incredible songwriter, and I just grew up with a value around creativity. And also, I think one of my strongest connections with my mom was around making art. And so that for me as a mother has been kind of like what I come back to, like when things feel out of control, when my kids were toddlers and I didn't, it was really overwhelming. And one thing I've discovered about, and I feel like it's because of my neurodivergence, is I'm very sensitive to sound. And so crying children is really overwhelming. So there's an impulse to just like do whatever you can to make that stop. And my son does the same thing. He actually takes an interest in babies and wants to figure out why they're crying, but it's because it's irritating him. But as a mom, like it was really stressful. But art kind of became our sanctuary. And it's so beautiful now because COVID was really difficult, especially for my neurodivergent son, the school part of it. The distance learning was just did not work for us. And then he was transferred to another school because he needed more support and these various things that happened. And then we just decided to take a year off. And his nervous system completely reset. He grew so much and learned so much, and really all of ours did. And we got this special time to bond as a family. And so they've just started back at school, and he was able to go back to our neighborhood school, and everyone is like thrilled to have him back, and there's better support for him there than there was before and lots of things. But he's just been showing his teachers, oh, I'm like, he's excelling in the arts, and he's, yeah, my mom has done that drawing with me, and he's telling them about, me being an artist. And it's really like, I feel like I'm doing the right thing, right? Like, my kids are both like, they found like they can express themselves creatively, and they're able to really value that. And I think there's just, if in our society, the we like art, but it's hard to value artists and what artists actually do, and how artists live. So that's a big piece of who I am and what I do.
You're not only doing the right thing, but it seems to me you're doing it in a compassionate and luminous way. So more
Mhm.
power to you. The Seattle Education Association went on strike for a couple of days, just when the kids just went back to school yesterday. And I took my daughter, who's in an independent school south of here, to the picket line to
Mm,
talk to one of the teachers. And
mhm.
what's the hang up here? Why are you guys striking? Are you getting paid what you need to get paid? She said, we're getting an increase, but really what we're striking for is because the school district wants to cut back on funding to support people with learning disabilities, and I said dyslexia and dyscalculia, and she said yes. And of course, Ella brightens up at hearing that. And now Ella, in a way, understands what unions are about. My dad, of
Right.
course, a big union guy for a long time. So, and then when you talk about ADHD and and masking and all of this, I'm turning 61 next week. So I was born in a time, thankfully, before Ritalin, before
Yeah.
they would have, put me on that as just a pro forma kind of thing, which seems to me a medieval way of dealing with
Yeah.
things. I mean, modern, pharmaceuticals, but sort of a Neanderthal kind of approach to mental health. And I'm feeling a resonance with your story and your son's story, and of course, not just with my daughter, but with myself.
Mhm.
So thank you for sharing that. I'm glad I asked the question because, that's ground that some people feel is private or personal and don't want to talk about. But since you had the Instagram thing, I thought I'd take a crack at it, and I'm glad.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because actually I feel like that's kind of like, I'm glad you mentioned it, because it really, it's a focus of mine, but also a real focus of mine is just bringing more awareness and um kind of guidance towards people that are just sort of discovering that this might be something going on with them, and also helping people with kids getting through school systems, and getting the resources that they need, because in the beginning it's super overwhelming and it can be really hard. But I've managed to, and I've been in a very receptive place, but managed to advocate well and figure things out. And I feel like I would like to share, with other people. So that's great. My last name Brucker means bridge builder. And my dad, both my parents, but my dad has been this incredible bridge builder in his life. And I just feel like I was born on a commune. Like I meant to share. And yeah, so there's this, yeah, and that's been, it's realizing these things about myself and my own children. It just is, it's like, yeah, we're supposed to share. That's what we're supposed to do.
Mhm. Which brings me back to Diane di Prima and a question that I'd really like to know. What did she love about poetry postcards?
Um, I think she really loved the spontaneity of it. And I think she loved the connection. Another exercise that she taught me was this exercise where we made a deck of our own words that were resonant to us and important to us. And then we would exchange words with other people and write from other people's decks. And I feel like the poetry postcards is a little bit, it's similar to that. it's this, you know, this sharing. Or there was another exercise that we did with her, which is we all went around and told a powerful dream that we'd had, a actual nighttime dream. And then we wrote poems from other people's dreams. And some really amazing things came out of those. And I just, you know, so much of her teaching was about kind of like unearthing. It was not about learning these traditional forms, although we did learn some traditional forms, but it was about, you know, getting rid of the unnecessary and really finding out what's underneath. And I guess the postcards, and yeah, just the spontaneity of it, and that exchange, and the sense of community that the postcards create or
Yeah.
foster.
Is there a postcard poem you'd like to go out on, and maybe a thought about the fest?
Sure. Let me see. A thought about the fest. I'll give you a thought about the fest first, and then a poem. Yeah, I just, you know, I love the fest, and this year at the beginning, I signed up late, and I wasn't feeling like the cards I was getting were very inspiring, and I wasn't getting a lot of handmade cards because that's, you know, that's part of what I like to do. But then suddenly I realized that it's not so much about getting as it is about giving and creating, and just yeah, just that it's really about giving, that it's about that kind of selfless giving, and that's a practice for life, really. And then suddenly the cards started to inspire me more. And whether they were, yeah, I got some interesting ones too, but it just yeah, it's about mindset, right? Life is so much about mindset and gratitude. And so that was a good lesson for me this year.
Yeah, and that's fantastic how that manifested. One last thought about the cards that had to do with your personal life. You know, McClure's personal universe deck. You should probably,
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's
Yeah,
something.
so what I'm working on right now is these. As soon as the fest ended, somebody invited me to this playing card exchange group, Altered Playing Card Exchange, and so even smaller than a postcard is the playing card. So I've been really inspired by those, and
Hold that closer to the camera so we can get a good look at that.
just one that I happen to.
Yeah. 8 of clubs. Okay.
8 of clubs, yeah, and I've done a whole bunch of these. I've gotten really inspired by
That's
them and done a whole
fantastic.
bunch of
That's
them.
fantastic.
Well, this one has, here's the Joker that is just, I have this hand stamp that has ended up on a lot of them, but anyways, yeah. So I like the postcard because it's a very small canvas, and I've discovered that the playing card is an even smaller canvas, but that's kind of exciting. So yeah, we'll see what comes next. Yeah, so I've got one more poem for you. When there is no moon to be seen, the stars shine more brightly. Sometimes I am the moon, sometimes I am the stars, sometimes I am the lake reflecting their light. Sometimes I am the trees who have no eyes. Do they sense the difference between moonlight and starlight?
Amen. Allegra, thank you for being part of the postcard community and for being here today. I'm really grateful for your time and for your inspired participation in the fest.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, and I look forward to the future.